Hello and welcome to the Data Engineering Podcast, the show about modern data management. When you're ready to build your next pipeline or want to test out the projects you hear about on the show, you'll need somewhere to deploy it, so check out our friends at Linode. With their new managed database service, you can launch a production-ready MySQL, Postgres, or MongoDB cluster in minutes, with automated backups, 40 gigabit connections from your application hosts, and high-throughput SSDs. Go to dataengineeringpodcast.com/Linode today and get a $100 credit to launch a database, create a Kubernetes cluster, or take advantage of all of their other services. And don't forget to thank them for their continued support of this show. Legacy CDPs charge you a premium to keep your data in a black box. RotorStack builds your CDP on top of your data warehouse, giving you a more secure and cost-effective solution. Plus, it gives you more technical controls so you can fully unlock the power of your customer data. Visit rotorstack.com/legacy to take control of your customer data today. Your host is Tobias Macey, and today I'm interviewing Vishal Singh about his experience building data products with and at Starburst. So, Vishal, can you start by introducing yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Vishal Singh. I am the lead product manager and head of data products at Starburst. I have been at Starburst for about 2.5 years. And I joined Starburst when we were less than 60 people. Now we are a big company. I still think it's a startup and we have innovated a lot, especially in data products. So thank you again for having me on your show. And I'm really excited talking about data products.
Do you remember how you first got started working in data?
Oh, yeah, it's a funny story. So I remember I did my undergrad from India, from an IIT. And then I remember when I joined the college, I was really bored in my first year in my undergrad. And I was looking, what should I be doing? And I got connected to this professor who was actually in geophysics. And it was actually in 2002. And he was doing some kind of modeling. And I was like, what are you trying to do? And I went and talked to him. And he was trying to predict how, rocks behave, predict how the rock's life cycle works. And like, how do you going to predict that? And he mentioned that you actually can use back propagation model using artificial neural network, or you can talk fuzzy logic. And then my question, what are those things? That was the first time I actually learned about the AI. That was the first time I learned about that you can use data to predict the behavior of rocks. It got me really excited. Then fast forward, I did my grad school from Penn State. And I also remember what my thesis was with FAA, and it's actually on the Penn State website. We were trying to predict how, when the Boeing land on the pavement, how the stress and strain works and what is the life cycle of even, the different electrical components in the plane, and also the life cycle of the pavement. And all the data was getting produced in Excel, and the amount of data they were dumping and they were creating was enormous. And I talked to the person at FAA. I'm like, so how are you going to analyze? And they're like, we're going to go to every Excel file and predict the pattern. I'm like, how many Excel files do you have? And they're like, it's millions. I'm like, this is impossible that they could ever finish this job. All I did was automated the process, and that was my thesis. Like, how can you automate the process and predict the behavior in the bulk of Excel files? And those two things got me, again, like completely, I was not thinking about data. It's just a completely real lifetime analysis. One, I got introduced to artificial neural network, even wrote some international papers with the professor I was working with. And second, I worked with FAA, and I wrote the thesis route. Before joining Starburst, my previous company was Cloud Health, again, a Boston-based startup, which was later acquired by VMware. And the cloud cost optimization over the time. I joined the company in January 2016, and I've seen customers who were on the cloud, how are they spending their costs on the Postgres or the different cloud, Redshift and other stuff, and how the cost moved from that to S3. S3 used to be put everything in there in 2016. 2018, customers started asking, how can I understand what should I use in S3 and what should I archive? So it just changed, and that's when I got introduced to Starburst. And I knew about Presto. which were later renamed to Trino. So I knew this problem is going to get bigger, and I wanted to actually be in a field where we are solving the problem of data, not just infrastructure, but how data is evolving, because I've seen the evolution over time. And I was very lucky to be joining Starburst when I joined, because when I joined Starburst in 2020 and today, even the 2 years with COVID and other stuff, the landscape has completely changed.
Bringing us to where you are now with the work that you're doing at Starburst, we're discussing the idea of data products, which is a term that has been thrown around in a lot of different contexts lately. And I'm wondering if you can just give your definition of what you conceive a data product to be.
I'm going to use the example of, again, my undergrad and grad school. I mean, I did not know what data product is. In fact, I did not even know there's a thing called artificial intelligence or ANN or backpropagation. But what I wanted to know, like, how can I use the data to produce a model which can be consumed to predict a behavior? That thing actually resonated with me in my undergrad and grad school. Like, I was given this bulk load of data, and they asked me, can you give us the right pattern? So actually then the FAA and other folks in the organization can use to predict the right behavior, or even give the analysis to Boeing, and also how the pavement in the airport should be created. And if we fast forward, if you look at a data product, that's exactly what we are trying to do with data product. The amount of data being generated every day is enormous. How do you actually, as a data engineer or as data scientist, how do I go and trust the data? And even if somebody comes like, yes, you should be able to trust the data, how do I verify that I'm able to trust it? Because not just trust, but verify. So data product, what has done is that it's actually taking the overload of data set and producing this gold standard data set with extra metadata around that. And extra metadata is what business context should I be using? And I want to double click more into the business context, because if I go talk to business context, to the marketing and sales in the same department, they will talk two different things. Marketing will say, I'm just care about leads. And sales will say, I care about the revenue. But it's exactly same set of data sets. So even the business context which is being added to data sets will mean totally different to two different organizations based on the work they're trying to derive from the data set. And that's where the metadata becomes really important. A few days ago, I was asking someone in my organization is that how can we understand what customers are using as of today? What BI tools are they using? And I got the result. And my next question was, how do I know how latest the data is? And let me actually go figure this out. The point is, like, sometimes you get the results of what you have asked your organization, but how do you know you can even trust the result? How do you know the results were valid from? When do you know these results will be valid till? Because you may know that this result is valid till yesterday or tomorrow, but it may not be valid in a month. How do you know till when I can use the report? So it's just data, but there's an extra behavioral aspect of the data, which is the metadata metrics, and also understanding what context the data is being used. Taking another approach is the governance approach. How can I easily, the data is being produced from different systems every day, every second. How can I securely share the data set in my organization while not exposing any PII information? For example, I just hired data scientists to write a model on the data product, but how do I ensure that data scientist is still able to run the model without making sure the data scientist is not looking at somebody's social security number? Data is not getting leaked on internet. So the governance piece just flows from the start to the end. And the end is all about creating business insight. And once the business insight is created, that is also a data product. Once I have created a business insight from a data product which was shared with me, how can I again share that with the full confidence, not what I had, but also instilling the confidence to the person who's going to use the data product? So it's an end-to-end using the data, understanding the metrics, and also trust the data, but not only trust, but how can I verify that I can trust the data?
An interesting lens as well on the idea of data as a product relates to how kind of software product teams operate. And one of the major trends in recent years is the idea of product-led growth, where rather than relying on spending a whole bunch on marketing and sales teams, you try to just get people to use the product and then from that decide, okay, what are the things they care about? How can we improve it? And I'm curious what you have seen as some of the ways that data teams either have or could adopt some of those practices of starting with something that is functional but not necessarily as complete as they might want it to be, and using that idea of product-led growth just to get people using it and get that feedback cycle working so that it can be a kind of collaboration or working with early design partners and just thinking through some of those aspects of product development in the work that they're doing on pipelines and data systems and data platforms.
Great question. In fact, I want to take a step back, why there's a change into especially the product-led growth. In fact, why we call it data as a product. Data as a product, the term is all started with the product. When we start treating data as a product, we start to question, what problems are you trying to solve? Who's going to consume the data and why they're consumed the data, and what kind of iterations do I need to do? Because in the product cycle, you go with the idea, you capture the idea, you create the solution, you get the feedback, and then you ideate back again. And that's why that is a really important factor when you're serving the data, solving the use cases. In the old days, and data has been there forever. If you go to the analyst and ask a question, like, can I get, for example, how much revenue from Q4? The analyst or whatnot, they will actually give you a dashboard. The dashboard was just given based on the question asked. The cycle of why are you asking for revenue? The consumer of the revenue is going to be the C-level execs. Are you trying to do that for maybe go to investors? What is the reason you're looking for it? And if you look for the revenue, what else extra information you're going to feed with it? Those questions were not being asked. But now we are at a stage where data is evolving at a rate that without asking the question, you might actually just take an insight, a question in your organization, and may create a wrong dashboard because you didn't ask the surrounding use cases on why the data was actually asked to produce. So taking that software engineering principles, not only you actually are taking the use cases, you're understanding the use case, you're breaking the use cases down into what should be the version 1 and what should be the version N of where this data as a product or what that needs to be fed to the organization. And then as the data is being shared and the product is being produced for the organization to consume, you're also looking for constant cycle, a feedback cycle, who is consuming it and how the people are consuming in an organization, and ideating it back to evolve that data product to the next level. While doing that, you're also looking at the history, which is like how much data has evolved over time, because people look at the code, like what was the code yesterday? Was the code yesterday, and how the code has evolved over time? So that also is going towards data set. This is why if you look at schema changes, people ask why in schema changes, they cannot look at how schema was 10 days ago, how the schema is going to be in the future. That also gives two pieces. One, understand the organizational behavior, but also understand how should I actually even fund my team, so that if there's a more demand for data set, then I need to fund my team to produce more data set in this trend or not produce this data set in the trend. That also goes in success metrics of data. So taking this exactly same principle, whether my product is going to be successful based on who's consuming it, what is the market fit, how long is going to be consumption, and when do I actually retire and add new features, or when do I retire this data set and add new actually aspect around this data set. This is why it gets me really excited why when we talk about data, we don't just talk about data itself, but we talk about data on a human consumption level as a product itself that is going to give insight and make someone's life easier because they're trying to derive value out of it.
Another thing to be aware of when we're talking about doing data as a product, making sure that it has all of these other contextual attributes about it, is understanding when that might be overkill and you actually just need to get the data from point A to point B and you don't need to do all of this extra work. And so just understanding how to think about which contexts a data product is useful and necessary, and in which cases you just need to actually do the mechanical work of getting data from A to B or transforming the data in such a manner. Because if you start to think about, okay, every time I interact with data, I need to treat it as a product, that can become very overwhelming. And so you get into the kind of analysis paralysis of I can't do anything because it might not be the right thing. Or if I want to do step A, I also have to do steps, X, Y, and Z. And just thinking about kind of what are the necessary trade-offs of data as a product versus data as just raw information.
Again, it goes to say the software engineering principles. Sometimes I may be just debugging my data set, and I may wrote some side code to just debug what makes sense for me. For example, I'm going to write a cron job over the night because I want to move some data set so I can actually write the code in the morning. Or I'm going to write some quality check on the data set so that I can run the unit testing. You're not going to make us every unit test into a product because that is actually being used to test the data set. Same as on the data, there's a quality and other component around that too. But the point is, we need to understand, what is the value of that to the organization? If there's no value of the data to the organization, if I'm just doing select star from the customer to understand exploration, that is not a data product. Because there's a value to myself. I'm still in exploration stage. I'm still trying to figure out how to even create a product. Every steps cannot be data as a product. Someone has to understand if something is being created as a product, that needs to bring value to the complete organization or a team. The other organization is kind to able to use it and use it in a more repetition way that they are also feeding as the other product. It's a kind of thing about microservices. You don't write microservices for everything. You just want to make sure if this is being written, it's also helping other microservices to understand and feed and out of it. If I want to just do a select star or whatnot from it, that could be subset of a data as a product. Every SQL statement, every Python script cannot be a data as a product. As I said, it needs to bring a value to the organization in order to be treated as a product.
There's also the question of, is this an internal data product or something that I'm building that is only going to be used by people within my organization or within my team? Or is this going to be an end user facing data product where it needs to have maybe some extra polish or features or kind of explanation about its purpose and context? And I'm wondering how to think about the different features or capabilities or additional systems and support systems that are necessary based on how and by whom the data product is going to be used.
Great question. I think it goes back to, for example, I'm going to use software engineering principles again here because there are an IT department in the organization and they may actually give you a tool to go run your own infrastructure. To different teams, and they may be running infrastructure. Just infrastructure needs to be run so they can actually use the infrastructure for their code they're writing. Same as data as a product. There might be data product which you're actually exposing internally, and it could be short-lived. It could be actually evolved. The polishedness and the SLA may be very different when you're actually treating internally. You need to understand, for example, if I'm actually creating a data as a product for the sales department, they may actually care about how many leads coming from the marketing and how can I use the leads to actually generate the revenue and also pipeline in my organization. So that is very internal because we are capturing the leads, feeding the department, the sales. But if the SLA doesn't meet a day, they can actually come back the next day. They can ask support tickets and actually ask the marketing department, can I actually get the results out of it? There are data as a product when you're exposing externally, where the SLA is very different because someone actually may be using it. Let's use the example of hedge fund. Hedge fund is actually runs around I need the most latest data so I can actually go work in the stock market. Now the SLA there is very much different because if you cannot wait for a day for the data to give you insight because the market has actually changed in a day. So based on the use cases and who is actually driving it, the SLA and the polishedness, the consumption, the consumer of who is going to be driving it creates how the data product and how much time needs to be spent on creating that data product. One more example I'll give. It's in a fashion industry. You are creating data as a product to understand how the fashion is actually evolving over time. And then I've actually talked to a data scientist who works in one of the fashion industries. And he basically said that my model never completes because I create a model with some input around this. It actually generates some value for a few days. Then again, the fashion industry again changed. Some other things are trending. Then I have to actually retrain my model on that stuff. So the product he is working on, he's basically saying this product is going to be valid for 2 years and I have to continuously keep working on it, updating it to make sure that the appetite in the business is getting into the recent trend. There are data products which is static, which is I just want to look at the historical data, in which you make it and you never work on it because you just want to look for historical context. What happened last year? And that could be valid for 1 month. And after that, a year later, you are creating a different insight to looking at what happened last year. So completely based on the who is the consumer. And I believe for the anything, is there any product which is created, for example, for external consumers, will always have more polish, will always have more user experience on it because you're giving the data set outside the organization who may not understand how the data was created, who may not have insight how the data was used, who have to go with the face value of the data to understand how they can use the data. While the internal data set, when the data is created, you have people who you can talk to. You can still have people who can reach out to understand the data set. And that's why the SLA and the user experience, that polishness will be completely different because the approachability is very different.
In terms of the ways that teams are thinking about building data products, I'm curious what you see as some of the common challenges that they encounter, either in terms of the technical or organizational or maybe tactical elements of how to think about building data products and what components are necessary to bring to bear, what skills they need as a team, both in terms of the individual roles and the organizational buy-in, and just some of that aspect of how your customers at Starburst and how your internal teams are thinking about, how do I even start thinking about building a data product? Like, how do we think about maybe treating it as a minimum viable product and like going through that iteration cycle? And what are the tools and techniques and skills that we need to make this happen?
So one of the questions when I have asked my customer, well, how do you define the success metrics of the product you're creating? It's really hard to get the answer out of that because, someone's going to use it. I'm like, okay, so how do you define if somebody used the data is successful or unsuccessful? And that part is really hard to quantify at the moment on when you treat data as a product. Somebody may be using data, but may not be using the data in a way the data was created. The other piece is that what tools should I be using to create this data set? And this goes into the skill set, like should I be using Python, SQL, R, and then you can look at the modern data stack. There's a gazillion tools available. So how can I actually fastly iterate on the data set? Especially time matters. Time matters in terms of cost, how much cost you're actually incurring to the organization creating the product, and how fast can I create the product. So again, the modeling, creating the model takes time, but how long should I train the model? When should I stop training the model? When I'm ready to actually expose this model that can be consumed. And those are still in a place where people are still debating that how this is the time. Should I actually stop it here or should I continue to do it? Should I just actually create the model to 80% and actually start giving insight to my organization? Other challenges which I've seen is the discoverability of data. Data is getting created literally every second. Every time somebody is actually clicking on the internet, there's a data being created. Which data should I be using? How do I actually know that have I used the right amount of data? Should I be using more or less data? Because if I use more data, then I'm going to take longer to train. And then I will actually spend more money and time in actually creating the model by the time the trend has changed. But if I use less data, then I actually may not be creating the insight right for the organization. So how do I actually discover the data which I need access to? If I actually found the data, is this data product or this data set has already been created with someone in the organization? Am I doing the job which has already been done in the organization? So I have seen, especially in the bigger enterprises, the same data set and data product and models are being created in different teams and different business units, again, without able to conversing with each other. And they are just doing it because, again, everyone's working remote. People don't know what data set is coming. And everyone is moving fast. Nobody's stopping. They're like, I got a request. I need to finish and I need to get this out. So people are producing the same model, same data set across organizations twice and duplicating their work. Now, if I actually was able to find the data set, for example, which I don't have to create it, how do I know who do I go talk to understand, get access to data set? And what processes do I need to follow to get access to data set? The challenges go on and on. But if you look at the main problem across that is the understanding. It's just like it's the same way if I go to the new city. I have never been to the new city. I look at the map, I look at the street, I actually ask people the questions. And if I know the city, I can walk around the city really fast. But I don't know the city. Even walking a block may take me 2 hours, may come back to the same block because I have no idea what I'm doing. The same problem is with data, is the insight, understanding the context of the data, understanding who owns the data, understanding that there's no 10 layer of folks, a centralization to able to give access data. If I have created the data, I should be able to give access data to other folks. So because the data volume has become so big that you cannot expect a team or one team to actually spread the tribal knowledge to your organization. It has to be the community base and the culture base where we are talking in terms of the data. And it should not be like I'm sitting in 10-hour Zoom calls or I'm actually chatting with people on Slack just to understand what is the first query I should be writing against. So there's a tons of challenges when it comes to data, creating a data product, tons of challenges just to understand the context of the data. And again, the challenges get worse because by the time I understand what data I should be using, that there's a newer version of the same data set available in the organization. I'm actually using the stale version.
Modern data teams are dealing with a lot of complexity in their data pipelines and analytical code. Monitoring data quality, tracing incidents, and testing changes can be daunting and often takes hours to days or even weeks. By the time errors have made their way into production, it's often too late and the damage is done. Datafold built automated regression testing to help data and analytics engineers deal with data quality in their pull requests. Datafold shows how a change in SQL code affects your data, both on a statistical level and down to individual rows and values before it gets merged to production. No more shipping and praying. You can now know exactly what will change in your database. Datafold integrates with all major data warehouses, as well as frameworks such as Airflow and dbt, and seamlessly plugs into CI workflows. Visit dataengineeringpodcast.com/Datafold today to book a demo with Datafold. In terms of what you're building at Starburst, I'm wondering how you think about enabling data teams to be able to orient their work in a way that they are producing products and actually building up a catalog of features that are useful for the organization and being able to kind of build an engine so that you don't have to redo the same task 15 times in slightly different ways. And so you're not just working in kind of a support desk mode of just waiting for somebody to ask for something and then filling their request and, trying to actually build out this suite of capabilities that is flexible and adaptable for people to be able to interact with it in the way they do with other products and be able to actually do some measure of kind of self-serve or being able to fulfill their own requests without necessarily having to involve an engineer in the process.
That has been the motive of Starburst as a company. For example, Starburst is behind the scenes uses Trino, previously known as Presto SQL, as an engine to connect to all the data source. So one of the key challenges was Starburst solved. Again, the engine was created, the Facebook, and one of the key reasons why engine created my data. You have different databases. You have Lake, you have warehouses, you have MongoDB, you have Elasticsearch and whatnot. They serve the purpose for how, why, and when you should use them. Which means that this is why it's a data stack. Like they are the reason why your data should live in Elasticsearch. There's a reason why your data should live in Lake. There's a reason why data should live in some warehouse. But as an analyst, if I want to derive the complete insight across all my data set, you want to connect the data set, which means that without Starburst, you have to move the data and then you consume the data. With Starburst, one of the challenges we have solved before even the data products is that you get access to the data in the environment they are actually being stored. You can connect and actually create insight between MongoDB, Elasticsearch, Snowflake, Lake, whatnot, while you're actually looking at the data set. You don't have to move. You can on demand write the queries, get inside of. Now, when we connected all these sources, now you're looking at not one river or one mountain, you're looking at 10 mountains. How do you know which is my biggest peak? That's another challenge. Like now I've actually created a data set. How do I share this data set? Because do I actually move it again somewhere? how do people can come in and still consume the insights which was created from the federated system without trying to even understand the complexities of federation? Because as a business analyst, they do not care about federation. They just care about, can I get access to my revenue data set or leads data that within a second or within a minute when I actually, and just share across to the marketing department where they can actually get what just happened. This is where the two personas works perfectly in Starburst. As of today, we have a data product where you can actually combine the data on demand without moving the data and create the insight with business context and share with different departments. The different organization doesn't even have to know that this data is coming from 10 sources. They're looking at the curated data set. And as the data behind the scene, for example, data in the lake changes, data in the warehouse change, the data product will also show the reflected and recent version so that it's not blocking the users who are accessing. With the insight, how the users are accessing data. So as a data producer, you can also understand who in the organization is accessing data. With the Starburst, you can also govern that how should I even expose the data to different organizations. Now, what we're trying to do is like when you are actually just data set is created, how can I use this data set with other domain and combine and create a new data set? So instead of where we want to go with the data product is that not you're just federating from the different sources, but you're federating on the use cases because the insights being built between sales and marketing department can be used to create a whole new insight which could be useful for product department. So now people are with the Starburst data product, we are federating those to understand what level. One of the customer actually rightly said that, I'm going to use the quote without using the name of the customer. The data products is a catalog of catalog, which means that you have all the data set. You can search the data set, you can learn the data set. But as an analyst, if I go try to find phone number, I might find the phone number exists into this data set, phone number also exists into raw data sets, phone number also exists in this set. How do I understand this is the data set I should be using? Now, level the conversation. We have taken all the data set, the gold standard, this is the product you should be using, not just the data. But we are taking the productized version of data, calling it data product. So you're also getting this phone number also exists in this data product, which had been verified by some admin, which had been stamped and certified by somebody that you should be using for this use cases. While you can also understand who is the owner, also understand who can give you access, what context has been used in the past, what is the NSLA, and what is the success metrics of this data product which has already been available to you. Looking at that, you are a lot more confident, goes to my point, trust but verify. You might see the trust, like, okay, data product is what I should trust, but you're also able to verify that this has been verified by the metrics which is available in the data product. So it takes the concept of trust but verify, and once that's available, you don't have to go looking at the raw data sets because your persona is just creating the insight, and the raw data sets comes to the people who are creating pipeline and also creating data products, and they also understand how data product is being consumed by a customer. Taking an example, if I create a feature in a software and feature is never being used by anybody else, I can look at the insight, I look at the different product analytics. We need to not spend any more time on this feature, let's shut it down and let's work something else. Same as data product. I created data product, understand how it is being used internally or externally. It's never been used. Let's stop wasting our time in it. And let's actually focus on other use cases. So it's also helped the prioritization on the data engineer or data producer side of it, where they can understand where they should focus their time and how should they prioritize it. Which is the prioritization place can only come when you understand the consumption side of it and success metrics of this data product being used in or outside the organization.
In your own work at Starburst of building some of these extra features to help your end users, but also maybe dogfooding some of them, I'm curious, what are some of the complexities or challenges that you're running into as you think about, okay, I think this is what I want, and I think this is what other people want, and then figuring out what is the shortest path to decide whether or not I'm wrong?
So it's a good question. I'll use about the dog fooding piece to it. We do dog food our own data products in the organization too, where we actually trying to understand For example, we have tons of connectors in Starburst, and we're trying to understand which connector is being used in what way. For example, if the lake connectors is most used by our customers, then we want to put extra focus on those connectors so that we can make it more performant, we can make it more scalable, because this is how it can generate more and more customers coming to the Starburst. So we are looking at those data sets. We're also looking at data sets with the alignment with the customers, but the customers actually, most nodes actually go in the Salesforce. So how do you actually connect the data sets which is being collected into Lake with the data set in Salesforce to generate the insight? Then there's another set of data sets, like, for example, in a month and a half, in February 9th, we're having a Data Nova. And on Data Nova, we'll be getting a lot of leads to understand who is actually talking about what set. So those leads are also coming in. So now there's a 3 set of data sets we have. One, the data from our existing customer, what kind of data can generate revenue, and other, what is the future pipeline can we generate? So if we just focus on one of them, we will be actually just serving to our existing customer, cannot grow our customer. If we just focus on the leads, then we cannot focus on our existing customers. If we focus on those two without focusing on Salesforce data, then we cannot focus on revenue aspect. And that's how we are dog fooding it. But again, sometimes I believe there's an art to it, which is where we talk about it. Like, okay, we know there's a customer who has actually did the talk, we have collected those data sets, and we know that they have actually asked about XYZ. Should we actually go in that direction? Or does a customer just mention one of 10 things, and did we just miss the 9 things? So those 9 things, it's like sometimes data is not there, and we have to make an opinion based on what we have seen. The opinion is changing every second. So that is the hardest part we have seen. Second hard part, which I can talk about, one things we have in data products, we have a discussion board in data products. We added the discussion board in our data products for the reason that people will come in and add some comments around that. But do realize that most people have actually discussed on the Slack, or may discuss in Teams, or maybe email them, maybe discuss over text messages. Nobody wants another discussion board to discuss it. So how do we actually consume the information which is someone may be discussing on a Slack to use that to ideate how this data product should be evolved? So those challenges we are actually following closely to understand that no one will going to ask a question in discussion board in the data product. They probably will ask a question on the Slack, or they probably will actually create a ticket in Jira to understand how can I get access to. So how do we connect those tools with the data product is something we are still in the exploration stage.
Another challenge in the context of data products and the overall data ecosystem is thinking about kind of what component of the data stack owns the experience, where it can be very fragmented, having to go to 3 different places to be able to get the entire picture of something. And I'm curious how you're thinking about that at Starburst and how you've seen your customers address some of that challenge of, okay, I've got 3 of the things I need for this to be treated as a product, to be able to get the context in this one platform, but then I actually have, maybe the governance aspect in this other platform, and the person who is trying to actually understand all of this is using a third platform to access it all. So how do I stitch it all together in a way that they're not getting frustrated and I'm not having to, run around with my hair on fire?
That is so true. Somebody I have chatting, they literally had a data catalog in their company. And the data catalog is completely independent from the warehouse or the data source. And the most people who are creating a data set or data product are creating very close to where they live, or very close to the query engine. And they are the folks who should be responsible for documentation, because they are the one who are creating data set. They are the one who has most context when they create data set. Now, as a user, when I have actually 10 different priorities on my hand, you're asking the same person who is actually writing a code to have, okay, now I'm writing one line of a code instead of writing a documentation or comments before that. I have to go to a completely different tool where I have to write documentation on it, and then come back to this tool and create a new set of data product, and then come back to another tool to write documentation. Now take another level. Now I created data table or data set or data product. How does the other tool know which user created it? Because that user may not be present in that tool because of other reasons, because of monetization aspect of that tool. And then you may never bring the user in that tool. So suddenly the person who created the data product or data set in one tool may not be available in another tool. So if I look into that tool, I may not even know what is the right person to go ask the question unless the data admin come in and add the metadata, which is the owner metadata, into that tool so other person can understand that person is the owner. It goes back and forth because the simple piece is that if I look in one place, I can understand. But if I'm looking in one place and then I go to another place, then I have to remember what was in that place to add more context to the second place. And then you keep adding multiple data stack, the problem gets worse. And that is one of the things we are trying to do at Starburst, one of the recent release feature called data discovery. What we did in Galaxy, which is our software as a service platform, when you create a data set, actually the moment any user, which is he or she, comes in, adds a catalog, we automatically grant that person as the owner of the catalog or the cluster the person has created, which means that person doesn't have to go add a new set of metadata to actually understand who is the owner. Because if you can create it, which means you are the creator, you are the owner. You do have an option to transfer the ownership, because if you, for any reasons, you can always transfer the ownership. But this automatically get created. Second thing, the metrics information. The most metric information in the other tools is actually getting scraped and getting built. Our metrics information, which is how we are doing in Galaxy, is automatically getting pre-filled and automatically getting filled based on who are the users interact. A user doesn't have to interact within Galaxy. All they have to interact with that catalog outside the Galaxy using, let's say, Tableau, Power BI, Metabase, any other tool, and we'll capture those metrics to generate what are the top tables somebody is using, who are the top users, and those top users doesn't even have to be part of the Starburst Galaxy. If the user is using in Tableau, we have those metadata coming to us and we automatically generate those metadata. Now, if there's a query fail from Tableau, how do you know that query failed from Tableau? How do you debug the query? Not just getting inside of the query. That's where the data producers come in. They're looking at the complete metrics, not just based on understanding the data product, but debugging the data product. Because when it comes to the product, if you cannot debug the product, how do you know the product is actually up to the quality you expect it to be? So you can actually debug what queries have failed, how the queries are performing, all their metadata is being automatically collected. There's a few things we are actually actively working on, is that taking that ownership concept, like, when you create a table, if some user comes and creates a table, the user has given automatically owner of the table. If I am the owner of the table, I can decide to give privileges to that table to anyone in the organization, including myself. It's a kind of saying that I have a key to the house. I can rent the house and give the key away, or I can actually ask somebody, invite people to the house. And that's how we're treating the ownership. You can create a table. You can actually give yourself, like, I do not want to use this table accidentally outside the anywhere. So you can even say, like, I myself don't have an access, but you can actually give other folks access. It's actually to go to the governance piece of the data set or the data product. The most metadata is automatically getting populated, which means that if you have actually built the definition in your source in the lake, we're going to pull that information automatically. So because we believe that people have so much on their plate, they should not be spending time building metadata. That should get automatically built in if that has been added in some place. Since being a query engine, we don't have to go scrape the data, because query engine, every time a table is added, table is removed, the Galaxy will actually look what modification has done. So we are showing the live information of the change of the data set as the data is moving. There's no delay in a different tool understanding the data set. There's no delay in understanding the data set. And to the point, when I can not only create the data set, if I have to write the documentation, the moment data is created, it actually gives you documentation option right there. You can choose to ignore it, but it's right there. This is next step. It's not next tool. It's next step. You also can expose and learn what other documentation has been created in your organization while in there. So while you're writing it, you can also attach the documentation for different data product, and those all within the context of the same tool. And that is where we are looking for it, is that most people do not want to jump tools to tools because it wastes time, especially in this DNA age. when people literally have hundreds of priority, when people do not commit to the timeline they're actually giving. Now, let's make their life easier. Let's not give them 100 tools because that will actually make their life harder.
Build data pipelines, not DAGs. That's the spirit behind Upsolver SQL Lake, a new self-service data pipeline platform that lets you build batch and streaming pipelines without falling into the black hole of DAG-based orchestration. All you do is write a query in SQL to declare your transformation, and SQL Lake will turn it into a continuous pipeline that scales to petabytes and delivers up-to-the-minute fresh data. SQL Lake supports a broad set of transformations, including high cardinality joins, aggregations, upserts, and window operations. Output can be streamed into a data lake for query engines like Presto, Trino, or Spark SQL, a data warehouse like Snowflake or Redshift, or any other destination you choose. Pricing for SQL Lake is simple. You pay $99 per terabyte ingested into your data lake using SQL Lake and run unlimited transformation pipelines for free. That way, data engineers and data users can process to their heart's content without worrying about their cloud bill. Go to dataengineeringpodcast.com/upsolver today to get a 30-day trial with unlimited data and see for yourself how to untangle your DAGs. In your experience of working at Starburst and with your customers, I'm curious what you have seen as some of the most interesting or innovative or unexpected ways that you have seen people approach the idea of building data products, and some of the ways that they've applied Starburst in that context.
I think the first customer of data product surprised me because the data product initially, when I was ideating it last year with most user experience, my intent was to be used within the organization. That was our version 1, like shared across the organization. Like you create the data product, you create for one domain that can be used by that domain. The full visibility into the gold standard data set with the business context and the ownership around that data set. The first customer who used the data product used this for a completely different reason. They actually embedded the data product. What they actually used Starburst behind the scene to fuel their website, which means they were actually, the outside users were coming in, they were asking for some set of data set, and instead of them building the data set, they were actually using that as an API call and those queries to create data products on demand. And all the metrics which Starburst was having, they were exposing it on their website. So basically, they used our data products to expose and make it externally available data products, which was not the intent when we were ideating on data products. Happily surprised. And then that also gives us another use cases. The other use cases which I've seen are not intentionally needed. Here, like most customers, what they do, they have legacy data sets and they also have a cloud data set. And the customers are always in moving the data from legacy to cloud, especially they are in the cloud first strategy. But from after with Starburst and data products, what I have seen, instead of moving all the data set, they can actually materialize the data. What they can do, they can connect to the legacy on-prem data set, connect to the cloud warehouse or cloud S3, and then they can actually decide that I just want to use 2 columns from legacy data set from one table and use 2 columns from S3 or ORC file and materialize into S3. So what they are doing, they're using data products to actually create this small data set. So instead of moving everything, they're just materializing one small data sets to cloud, and then using cloud elasticity for the consumption of their data set. So now what we have done is like creation can be done with a small compute, but consumption can be used by cloud compute. The customers have been really innovative on how they're using data products, which is very exciting to see as we are on this journey.
In your experience of operating in this space of data products and spending a lot of your time thinking about it and building some of the features to enable those capabilities, what are some of the most interesting or unexpected or challenging lessons that you've learned in the process?
Few stuff. One thing, we made mistakes on how and what to be done initially. For example, when we actually created data products again, the materialized views, which I was talking about, we went with the all data products as a view in the first version, which was not a mistake, but most customers actually were looking to create the cross-organizational, cross-region, and cross-cloud data product. Initially, we believed that data product will be locally into one region, but which was not the case. Totally evolved the cross-cloud and cross-organization data product. The intent of asking for, like, can you materialize data came really fast. So as I said, like a few things which was unexpected. We literally acted on those things to actually add those stuff. One of the things which I just talked, we spent time on adding discussion board, which I was not used often because we felt that people will come in and have discussion. But it's like most discussion are being happening outside that. So which is what in the exploration stage, how can we bring those information into the data product? The other challenges we have seen is what we call, especially the data across geography, which means if the data is actually in Europe, if data is in the US, we do have a Stargate connector. So how do we actually communicate with those data sets? So one fast follow-up was like connecting the data set across geography. How can we do it securely without making sure that customers are not exposing accidental data set using it to compliance that region respect? And also how can we do it cost efficient? So a couple of investments we have made on that, which is already available in Starburst, to actually expose data products using the cross-cloud, cross-region, and respecting the compliance across. But we're still in the learning stage, and that's why the approach we are taking in our software as a service is that there is a reason, as I talk about catalogs of catalogs, but people still want to be able to search the raw data set, which goes to my initial point I was making, trust but verify, which means that I can look at the data product, but I do want to see which raw data set is used to create that data product. I may not be interested in the raw data set, but I just want to make sure that you or anyone who has created the data product have not used the information which may be giving wrong, created the wrong use case. This is where the verification of data product has been one of the biggest focus as we develop in the Starburst Galaxy, and that's the approach we are taking there.
As you continue to iterate on the Starburst platform and the Galaxy product and work with customers on enabling this approach of building data products rather than just completing data tasks, what are some of the things you have planned for the near to medium term?
So one of the near to medium term plan is as I said, like the data is evolving every day. So once data is in Glue or Hive Metastore or even in the lake or in a warehouse, you can easily use Starburst to actually consume the data product or data set. But we have always heard from the customers that, how do I know if there's a new file on the lake? How do I know that something has changed? How do I know what evolved over time? And also, I don't want to do it manually. I just want to be automated. So a few changes we're making. When you're looking and searching for a data set, you're not searching for the data set which you have already cataloged, but you can actually go search for the data set and actually create new schemas, new tables based on new files which have landed in Lake, which is go to our schema discovery, which is already available in Galaxy, but we're adding more user experience on the top of that. One of the key components around any product is the usability. Usability could be either UX, could be guidelines, or the best practices. We are really, really hyper-focused on the usability of data products and making it easy. Because if I want to run a schema discovery, which is the example I'm giving, I don't have to go and run it manually and figure out where the bug happened, or what if there's an unstructured file. I don't want it to actually go and delve into everything, like why there was an unstructured file. Maybe I should get an email that there were 10 files were found, 9 were registered, 1 were unstructured, and I have the information. So exposing the right information to the customer, not just an overload of the information. How can we automate to make our customers' life easier, just to then instead of giving too much information, the customer gets overwhelmed. So that is the balance we're taking very carefully, just making the usability and consumption be so simple that we will ensure that anyone, whether the data engineers to the consumer, should be able to understand the data set. Also giving enough information that if I want to do manual schema discovery, if I want to change from the format from ORC to CSV to something else, I should be able to do that. So we are also adding those parameters too. So there's also available for sophisticated user, but also taking the overwhelming of the error use cases or whatnot, but more on the recommendation side of it.
Are there any other aspects of the work that you're doing at Starburst or your experience working in the space of data products and the feedback that you've gotten from customers that we didn't discuss yet that you'd like to cover before we close out the show?
So one of the things which is one of our customers, I was looking at Trino Foundation and stuff like that. People have used Trino for many, many use cases. Like I was looking at I believe it was I don't remember the customer, so I will be careful of naming the customer. Somebody actually used Trino to run the data quality, which I was very surprised and fascinated with what they have done. But to the point, what I want to make sure that even though we are trying to ensure that customers can understand the data, explore the data, catalog the data, can create the data products, can create the more metrics and documentation within Galaxy, our primary motive and primary objective of Starburst has been optionality. And we will never walk away from that. What I mean by optionality, if someone is already using some kind of tool, we also want to support that tool. We never want to say that you should always be using Starburst. We have been always open, always supporting the community, always ensuring that tools, like for example, I want to use Power BI, when should we use it? We have already great expectation, for example, integration with Trino. We will support that. So point I'm making that because of the community, the optionality will always continue to exist. We want to make sure the user experience is grounded within the Galaxy, but at the same time, we also want to ensure that customers get to use the tools they're most comfortable with. The customer get to actually be productive in the tools they want to be productive, while also ensuring that we are trying to bring the customer the great user experience within Starburst and Starburst Galaxy.
Well, for anybody who wants to get in touch with you and follow along with the work that you're doing, I'll have you add your preferred contact information to the show notes. And as the final question, I'd like to get your perspective on what you see as being the biggest gap in the tooling or technology that's available for data management today.
One of the biggest gap which I see is that reactiveness and no agility. There's a confusion folks have that I need to be reactive to be agile. That is incorrect. One has to be planning, one has to be prioritizing, and one has to be understanding what needs to be done and iterating on the top of that. That can only be done by collaboration across organization. As I said, there's no thing called one person army. Is the organization and driving for the organization. And driving for the organization does not come from one team. It comes from across the team, communication across the team. So most tools, as I've seen as of today, is they get hyper-focused into one use cases and forget that as a user, as a data engineer, I may have 10 different problems. And even the one tool may solve that use cases so perfectly, but that doesn't help the person who's coming in, doing the job, trying to make sure that I'm doing the right for the organization, delivering for the organization, and actually getting lost into, okay, I solved the quality problem with one tool. How do I solve the cataloging problem? How do I solve the governing problem? How do I solve the creation problem? So I think the trend, as I see over the years, is going to be more collaboration across organization, more communication across the organization, and the prioritization, not just across the team, the prioritization across the organization to create the tools, not which is beneficial for the team, but creating a tool which is beneficial for the team to drive the insight and making sure the organization is on a trend to driving the right thing which needs to be done for that particular organization.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to join me and share your perspectives on how to build data products and the contexts in which they are useful and how those varying applications of the product thinking can be used for the different use cases that the data is being applied. So I appreciate all of the time and energy that you and the folks at Starburst are putting into making that a more tractable problem. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Tobias. And I said, I'm a huge fan of your show, so I'm really, really honored for you having me on the show. And as you can say, I get very animated and excited talking data products and Galaxy. So really appreciate having me on your show.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out our other shows, Podcast.init, which covers the Python language, its community, and the innovative ways it is being used, and the Machine Learning Podcast, which helps you go from idea to production with machine learning. Visit the site at dataengineeringpodcast.com to subscribe to the show, sign up for the mailing list, and read the show notes. And if you've learned something or tried out a project from the show, then tell us about it. Email hosts at dataengineeringpodcast.com with your story. And to help other people find the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends and coworkers.